This is the Big Fish Cares Podcast. Big Fish Cares Podcast. And here's your host, Benny Fisher.
This is going to be a cool episode today. We're going to talk about ADHD, and I'm not actually going to be talking about it. My guest and friend, Elizabeth Lytle, who is the marketing trainer at Contractor Dynamics, she basically runs the whole company over there. I've met her through my buddy Joe Hughes, who's been on this podcast. He was in one of the earlier podcasts. I've gotten to know Elizabeth over the last year or two, and she's been great to work with. It's awesome to see women in the roofing industry, and I'm excited to have her on the show. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hey, Benny. Glad to be here. I am going to make a correction there. I'm the client success director at Contractor Dynamics, which is why it probably seems like I run things, although our team is really the amazing, they're really the amazing ones, and they're doing all the work on the ground day to day. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I have known Benny for, I guess, maybe a year now, or a little under a year, and it's been a wild ride, as all of you know who know Benny. But yeah, super excited to be here, excited for this conversation.
Yeah, she called me, she texted me, and she's like, hey, I got questions about ADHD, or did you make a post on Facebook?
Yeah, I think we had a brief discussion about it at RoofCon, and then I put a post out on Facebook and heard some really, really interesting feedback from a lot of people. So yeah, I'd love to kind of dive deeper into that.
Why were you asking about it? What piques your interest?
A part of it is because I've got a couple of clients who have talked about the struggles of being a business owner and having that ADHD diagnosis. And then a part of that is that my husband has that as well. And so living with and doing relationship in life with someone who has that is a really, it's an interesting experience when you don't have the same struggles. So doing family business together and, living general life together, it's just interesting kind of to see, how you have to approach things differently, how you have to communicate differently. So that's kind of what sparked those conversations.
There's a book I'm going to recommend to you right out of the gate that me and Brittany read together. It's called ADHD and Us, A Couple's Guide to Loving and Living with an Adult with ADHD.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'll look it up for sure.
Yeah, so that'll be good. Let's just give the audience a quick, brief background on who you are, where you're from, kind of like a brief life story, so that way they have some context. And then we're going to flip the script, and then she's going to interview me.
A little bit about myself. Yep, I am located in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'm married. I've got 2 little ones, and my third and final, emphasis on final, one on the way, due in March. I am, like I said, I've been the client success director at Contractor Dynamics for, I guess I've been there almost 3 years now, 2.5 years, I guess. And before that, I had my own company where I did events. So I did some weddings, some showers, all kinds of different events. So an event planning company, which was really, really fun. But I found that I was working really, really long hours. I was working the weekends all the time. And while the events were fun, I was always tired. And again, the money was fine, but I knew that was something I didn't want to do for long term. And I had a little one. I was home for a while, and I just had that itch to get out and to continue working and helping other people. And so I was looking for something that was remote. I started basically giving critiques to some buddies of mine who have a contracting company here in Memphis, Tennessee. I was constantly telling them what I thought they should be doing with their marketing and their social media. And they were like, well, do you just want to help us with this? So I decided that that's what I would do, that I would help a few local businesses in my area come up with marketing plans specifically based around social. And I had clients that were in a few different industries. And I found that when you don't have a specific niche, it can be really difficult to come up with a marketing plan without a ton of work, a ton of research. And I really wanted to find something niche, and I was really, really looking for something that I could do remotely, so that I would be able to walk out of my home office if I needed and see my kids, or I would be able to have the flexibility to go, do X, Y, and Z, or go, for a run in the middle of the day. And then that's when I found Contractor Dynamics. And I went through the Contractor Dynamics program actually as a client for one of my clients to learn a little bit more about how to run Facebook ads successfully. And at the time, Joe was leading all of the client meetings. And so getting to know him through those was really cool. And I could tell, man, these guys really know their stuff. And they did not have a good back-end program at the time, so I just stuck around and they never kicked me out. And I was there for way longer than I should have been. And finally they said, we'd love to have you come on as a trainer. So I came on as a trainer, super fun, part-time, and then it has really grown from there. And I've definitely found a home at Contractor Dynamics. I'm just absolutely loving building a career there. The culture there is amazing. I've met so many incredible people from the business. Joe and I really, really align well in terms of our personal core values and the things that we're looking for out of life, the things that are important to us. Mm-hmm. So it's been so much fun. It's hands down the most fun maybe job that I've ever had, because it really does feel like we have something really, really special, and that the community of people that we're building is something really different than I've ever experienced before. So that's a little bit more about me.
Yeah, well, it's been fun watching you guys work together kind of from afar. I would always see you on the Facebook, and then I was then I got to meet you and I work with you a little bit, and it is true. Everything you see online is just the real authentic you. And I think that what you and Joe have together is pretty cool. It's a good little yin and yang, and it's awesome. So that's some context about Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth, she had so many questions on ADHD. I said, let's just do a podcast. We'll answer them live in person. So go ahead. I'm going to let you be the host.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. Well, a couple of the reasons I'd like to have this conversation is, number one, I work with a lot of clients who have talked about the struggles of having ADHD and what that looks like when you are in life building a career, specifically when you have a business and you have employees and you have other people relying on you. And then I've seen kind of the interesting both challenges and gifts of working really closely or even living with someone with ADHD. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about ADHD specifically in your life, Benny. So tell me this. How old were you first when you got your specific diagnosis?
I was in third grade, so I think I was 8 years old. It was right when it just first started becoming a thing, back in the late 80s, probably 1989, I bet.
Okay.
The teachers, I couldn't sit still in class. I was given, I was not the best behaved kid. Probably because of the ADHD, kept me really rambunctious and really energetic. And I would talk a lot. I'd ask a lot of questions. I would never stop. And the teachers didn't know what to do with me. My parents didn't know what to do with me. So they sent me to testing, right? Because that's what they do in school, right? They send you down to the guidance counselor, and then they put you through a gamut of these tests that, I had a hard time sitting through the test. I remember fill out this stuff. And the problem back then is because, intelligence has nothing to do with ADHD, but they do grade your intelligence. But because I was intelligent and I wasn't I'm learning disabled as far as my IQ, they told me that I just needed to listen more and be better behaved. And my mom didn't want to put me on any medication. I think that we went to a couple doctors, and they basically said that I should be on Ritalin. And that wasn't something that my mom didn't. I don't think had a good understanding of what medication was and what what ADHD was. So we come from an old school strict Baptist home, where it's hey, we're just going to follow more rules and we're just going to put more guidelines on you, which in turn probably not the best thing to do with someone with ADHD that I'm learning about now. So
sure. So you're in third grade, you're 8 or 9 years old. And when you went and got all that testing done and they told you that, or more likely told your parents that, did you feel and again, obviously you're a child. So let's, if you can think about what you felt when they talked you through that, how did that make you feel? Did you feel like you had some kind of an answer, or did you feel like that was some kind of label that was a bad thing?
Yeah, well, I don't really ever remember the label ADHD. I remember being hyperactive. I remember the hyperactive part. Now they don't even have. Now it's not even really ADHD. If now it's just ADD, right? Because hyperactive is not. There's not always hyperactive people that have ADD. Some people are more internal, more introverted with it. So to me, it was just like, oh, I was hyper, and there wasn't a lot of information on it back in the day. There was no internet, there was no. They just, now that I've done my own research on it, they just actually started. I think they coined the term in like the mid '80s to begin with. So this was a new thing. So it wasn't really like a big deal. Back then, it was just more like, hey, you should be on Ritalin. They were putting kids on Ritalin. I do know that. I didn't do it. And, my parents were divorced when I was 5. So a lot of times, almost everything that happened bad to me, it was because he's from a divorced home. It was like because he was from a divorced home. And the more I look back, I'm thinking like, no, that actually wasn't it. It was because like I have all these things going on in my brain that caused me to act a certain way. And I've learned now that it's all about the environment that you're in. And I think that as we have more information about it now, I think the kids and the adults now will be able to operate in a little bit more of a pleasant way. And they won't have so much stigma, and they won't have so much like self-doubt and self-limiting beliefs inside their brain. Because really it was an environment of everyone telling me like I should be doing something different and I should be just doing this in a controlled environment. And it never felt natural, ever. Like ever.
I'm glad you're bringing up the environment, because that's a big question, and I see a variety of answers from people here. But my question there would be, one of the things you just said is that you were not well behaved. But what's interesting is the things that you said after that were that you had a lot of energy. Well, that doesn't describe someone who's not well behaved. You said you asked a lot of questions. That doesn't describe someone who's not well behaved. But then you said you never stopped. So I can understand how maybe that could be viewed in a disruptive way in a classroom. Mm-hmm. But tell me a little bit more about the classroom environment that you had growing up. Did you switch from school to school? Did you stay at one school the whole time?
Yeah,
tell me about your school.
Yeah, so in elementary school, I was at the same elementary school till 4th grade, and then we moved inside the same school district and just moved to another elementary school, and then I stayed in that same school district until I graduated. So I was in the same school district my whole life. The kids, so there's 2 different spectrums, right? There's the kids that I dealt with, and then there's the teachers, right? And the teachers and the kids all knew it deep down inside, like that I was a really good person. And I feel like most people liked me to a degree at a macro level, but like when I would get a little annoying, it would start to cause some problems. I would get made fun of a little bit. I would get called out in the classroom because I might be talking to the friend next to me. People would always, kids, all the way up through high school, people would always be looking for my answers on my test because I'd be the guy done with the test in like 4 minutes while everybody else took, 45 minutes. I never did any homework.
Oh, interesting.
I never did any homework because there wasn't a purpose. I was like, hey, if I can get an A on the test, like, why do I got to do the homework? And I was happy just taking B's in school because I wouldn't do the homework, I would get a B because they would dock you so many points for the period. And I was actually okay with it because I never understood like why it was important to do the homework. Because I would just watch the teacher intently, learn from the teacher, ask questions, and then just never do any extra work on top of that.
Wow.
And I know why now. It's because I wasn't interested.
Sure. So were there parts of school during the day when you're actually in the school building? Were there parts of school where you actually excelled and enjoyed yourself?
Yeah, like on, stuff that I really, liked, like history. Like I had a really good memory. I had memorized all the presidents in order by the time I was like 5 or 6. I watched Jeopardy every day with my grandpa. I knew all the states in alphabetical order. I knew all the capitals, like by the time I was like 7 or 8 years old. So I was really, I really like math. Like I did like these math contests in school. I won the spelling bee. Like I did all these things and I excelled because I really just wanted to, show off that I was smart, right? Because that was the one thing that I had that a lot of the other people didn't. And sometimes I took that and I didn't know anything about, empathy or anything about, trying to be kind as much, because I just was like, hey, kids are showing off how good they are at sports. I'm going to try to show off, how smart I am. And it would come across a little, probably demeaning to the other children. I would correct the teacher. When the teacher said something that was wrong, or she put something on the chalkboard and maybe she spelled it wrong, I would correct her and I would get in trouble. That would be a bad look. The teacher would kind of like, get upset with me. And it was, I got lots of detentions, and they were all for talking too much or being disruptive in the classroom. It was never like I got caught smoking cigarettes in the bathroom, type of trouble. It was always for talking too much.
That's one of the most common things that you hear from people is that they were it's too much talking. They were the kid who they got moved up to their desk, had to sit next to the teacher. They had to sit at the teacher's desk, or they were separated from the other kids because they were talking too much, meaning they were a distraction to other people in the room, or they were irritating to the teacher. So I guess my question was, around that is, I think that in your typical school, not every teacher or school is equipped or trained to understand how to deal with those different kinds of challenges or learners. Not every child learns the same. Do you think that had you been in a different school environment, it wouldn't have been the same way? Or do you think it would have been the same no matter what for you?
Well, I look at it as because the era I grew up in, they didn't have the education. The teachers didn't know how to deal with it. It's not like they had training on how to deal with this. Now I have an 8-year-old and I'm like doing parent-teacher conferences. Like they're so much more equipped. I mean, it is like, and I'm not a big fan of government and school teaching and the way the whole system's set up, but I will tell you, it is a lot better. I mean, it is like night and day different, the way they can handle these kids, of all kinds of different types of kids too, not just kids with ADHD, like kids that probably deal with PTSD, kids that deal with, bad situations at home. These teachers are much more equipped now. Because at the end of the day, the curriculum pretty much stays the same. So teachers need to really get involved more with the emotional intelligence and the behavior, because that can make them a better experience for the kid. Because, I was, for lack of a better word, I didn't realize how traumatized I was, growing up. But, that's where if I can say that I had trauma, it's because people didn't know how to deal with me. And I didn't know how to respond back. I had poor impulse control. I would just blurt things out, I would always tell my mom and dad, when they would say something at home, I would say, well, why don't you guys try to do this? Or why don't you do this? Or I'd give them all these ideas, right? Because ideas were endless with me. And, they would say, come on, kid, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not taking advice from you, right? It was kind of that type of feeling, which made me feel really bad. And I always wanted everybody's acceptance and everybody's love. So I would try to do things to get that, and sometimes I went about it in a backwards way.
Sure. I think that that's a huge thing that I hear over and over again from people who got their diagnosis younger as children, that they, even if they got their diagnosis, even if they were on medication or not, because everyone has a different experience with medication. Some people never got on medication and they feel they should have. Some people got on medication and they felt like it changed who they were. They felt like when they were on medication that they were one way, and then all of a sudden it brought them down completely. And not only did it make them sit still in class, but it also made them, it's like it dulled their personality. They couldn't get as excited about things. They, didn't have as many ideas. And so some people are really against that sort of medication. I think medication has come a long way. We're not slapping every kid with Ritalin these days. There are a lot of other options, which is awesome. But one of the things that, again, I hear, no matter what they had to support them in that, is that people felt like they were really different in a negative way, and that everyone saw them as like a problem, an issue, as someone who just couldn't fit in because they didn't try hard enough, or they didn't want to fit in, or almost like they were trying to do things to get on people's nerves.
Yeah, I was classified as lazy.
Yes, 100%.
Lazy because I didn't want to do my homework, or I didn't want to do my chores, so.
Didn't read the book. Yeah. Use the Cliff Notes instead. That's a common one for sure. I think the most common thing I saw in that Facebook post that I put, with a lot of people giving some feedback, is homework. That very few people actually did the homework. Growing up as a student and as a child, I would never have even considered not doing my homework. I would have not, to show up to class without my homework done would never have even crossed my mind.
So I'm a senior in high school. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm a senior in high school, and I was in calculus, right? Which, again, I was only taking it because like that was the next math program for me to take, and I never knew that like I was like, I'm never going to be an astronaut. I'm never going to be an engineer. I'm never like, I already knew that I wasn't going to do that. I'm like, why am I taking calculus? But I needed something to do. Like, I only needed English to actually pass high school that year. So I took calculus, and part of the calculus was if you do your homework every day, you can miss 3 homeworks and still get a 50 out of 50 for the homework grade. But if you miss 4, you get a 0 out of 50. So the first 9 weeks, I'm trying to be the good student and try to press through it and try to do hard. And like, I'm literally going home 2 hours every night trying to figure out this calculus homework. And eventually, like, I realized I got all the way to the 9 weeks and I had missed my 4th one and I got a 0. And I did all that work and I got a 0. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to show this teacher. And then the rest of the year, guess what I did? I didn't do one of the homeworks. And he would come around every day and check everyone's homework just to see if you did it. He didn't check if the answers were right. And I literally had a blank piece of paper. I would see steam come out of his ears. And I would go, guess what? All you're going to do is give me a 0. And I said, I'm still going to pass the test. And I still am going to get a B in your class. So take that. And he got so mad because then I'm coaching these other kids on how to do that, like, and how to beat the system, right? Oh, teachers didn't like that at all.
I can imagine. Wow, that's interesting. Well,
that was the cynical side.
Yeah, of course, yes, and that comes out for sure. Going back to what you said about feeling like it was, kind of a traumatic experience, kind of fighting against those, assumptions about you or labels or whatever as a child. A lot of people have that. A lot of people feel like, they went through years and years of school with, their teachers hating them. Children believing that adults hated them for, being more energetic, which is, an awful thing to hear from a lot of people. Very, very common. Or being labeled as the bad kid, or, being, having the other kids say that they're, having all sorts of different labels. What was the biggest either label or kind of negative takeaway that you had from specifically school, and then we'll talk about outside of school next, but specifically in school, what's the biggest hurdle that you think all of those assumptions and all of those things you heard over and over again that you've had to get over as an actual adult?
Probably like being the class clown, I would say.
Can you unpack that a little bit more? What did you have to get over about that? Like, what was
then what it did was fuel me, like that was like the identity, right? So then what I did, was try to be more of a class clown. Like I tried to own it, and looking back, I'm thinking like, wow, like that was just like, there was no like wisdom from like up above that said, hey, that's not really what you want to do. I don't think, Mr. Fisher. There's probably another way to get these people's love and acceptance, but I didn't know another way. So when they told me that, I was like that. And then again, they would laugh, right? And they would, it was like 50-50. Half the time everybody would love me, and the other half the time everybody would hate me. And that was a weird place to be.
And your thought there is that you were looking for love and acceptance, and that's a way in which you thought you were finding it.
Yeah, temporary. It was always short term. It was always like quick little hits of dopamine, right? Like when I would make the class laugh, or I'd make somebody look stupid. Yeah, because I would do both, right? I would either use my intellectual skills to be able to make someone else feel stupid, which I look back and think like, that sucks. Like what a butthole. And then I would also use my humor to, get everybody to laugh, because inside I was always like, all right, what do I got to do to like get people to like me, and I would just use, humor to like try to do that.
Sure. Okay. And then outside of school, were you involved in other activities, sports?
Yeah, like I tried sport. Yeah, like I played. The only reason I really wanted to play sports was to fit in and hang out with the other kids. I wasn't really that good because, again, I was the same issues in school. Like I would ask questions. I didn't like just like the activity of just running around in a circle. Like when they would at football, when they just tell you to run, I was just like, well, this is dumb. Like, why aren't we doing X's and O's? Like, why aren't we playing? Like, nobody really could get through to me the importance of, like, why we do all the boring stuff. And so then I would just get disinterested, and then I would lose focus. Because the only times I can really focus, I mean, still to this day, are when I'm super interested in something. If I'm not super interested in something, it's really, really hard for me to focus.
Interesting. Growing up, did you go to church?
Yep. Every Sunday, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night.
And did you go to like a more traditional formal church? Were you having to sit like on a pew for an hour quietly?
Oh yeah. And I would and it was there was pens, and there was like offering envelopes, and I would get the pen out, and I would doodle on the offering envelope. I would doodle in my Bible. I would talk to people beside me. Then when we were like young, we would be with the other kids, so that wasn't as bad. But as soon as I got to like high school age, where like I had to go sit in the main auditorium with my parents, and that would, sometimes I would fall asleep. Actually, I would sleep a lot, and my mom would always be like she'd always hit me every time. Like she saw me go to nod my head, she'd like hit me. And it was just like, because I just, and some of the times the things that they were talking about at big church, it was hard to understand sometimes. And I just, it got boring. And it wasn't because I didn't love God, and it wasn't, it was just because I was bored.
Sure. Okay. All right, let's talk about late high school years, okay? So you're, something's coming next. You're making a decision at that point. A lot of people are talking to you about like what you're going to do with your life. You're preparing for, adulthood as an 18-year-old, right? What's going through your mind at that point? Like, did you have big dreams of what your life and career was going to look like? No. Were you pumped up and excited about a next step being college or something else? What was your mindset specifically like in those later years of high school?
Well, my parents never went to college. Well, I think my mom went to college for a little bit, but she didn't make it, because I think she got pregnant and had me. So I think like education, like formal education, just wasn't really like that big of a deal in my house. My mom obviously wanted us to follow the rules and like get, good grades, just because like, that sounds good. And like when your kids bring home A's, you can tell your friends that they got A's and stuff like that, and you can be proud of them. But it wasn't like, they ever were pressuring us to go to college. But I will say that, school and the teachers and all my friends, I mean, they were all getting excited about college. And, my parents didn't really even know how to fill out an application for college. Like, it wasn't like they were pressing me. There was no guidance there. I didn't really, college sounded cool because it sounded like, all right, better than being at home, right? And I was like, all right, so I was looking forward to that. But then about like executing and actually like getting it all done and figuring out how I was going to pay for it. And so I ended up just going to a little community college. It was a division of Kent State, and by my house. And so I went there and I enrolled because I thought it was a thing to do. And I lasted like a couple weeks and then started like, sleeping in, didn't go. Next thing you know, I was like, then I realized like, why am I paying? Because I actually had to pay myself. My parents weren't paying. I had to pay myself. And then I like just put all these things together. I'm like, if I'm not going to go and I'm going to pay, like, I'm just not going to go. I'm just going to keep working. Because I had a job when I was 15 at a grocery store. And I did find a little bit of joy there. I will tell you that. That was interesting.
How?
Just, feeling like customer service, right? But taking care of old ladies, bagging their groceries, walking them out to their car, ringing up a cash register, stocking groceries. I worked in the customer service. The day I turned 18, they put me in charge of the whole front end. And I would count down all the registers. I would count down all the money. I would make sure that all the books were done. Literally the day I turned 18, they trained me to do that job. And I felt like a sense of purpose there, and I felt good about it. Now, would I still get in a little trouble at work? Yeah, of course I would. But
what kind of trouble?
Probably talking too much to customers, spending too much time with customers, spending too much time with employees, like hanging out and like being social. And then the bosses, it would definitely, wear on them. It wasn't quite as bad as the teachers. They were a little bit more understanding. I think it's because of my customer service skills and because of how nice I was always trying to be and how I was trying to always get everyone to like me.
Interesting. Okay, so...
I feel like I'm talking to my therapist right now. This is cool.
You do. What's so funny, Benny, is that in many of the different jobs that I've had, so I studied child psychology, and I'm very interested in understanding the why and what makes up the way people are, right? And so many of the jobs that I've had, I felt like there's an aspect of being a therapist to it. You know, like when I was doing like weddings and all of that, you know, sometimes you're sitting down with the bride and she's weeping and you're having to walk her through things, or you're having to like mediate between her crazy mom and her so that, you know, they're not going to murder each other before she walks down the aisle and all that. And even as I work with clients now, you know, being a business owner, a sole business owner, is hard freaking work. It's exhausting and it's emotional sometimes, and it's lonely sometimes, you know, being an entrepreneur. So there's so many aspects of this kind of thing where it feels like you're talking about.
And the reason that most of us are entrepreneurs, especially in the roofing industry, is because we can never find a home anywhere else that people would love and accept us. So we because of process of elimination, we had to like go out and do something on our own because we were already out of all these options. If you listen to most of our stories, it was failure after failure at jobs, or we get fired, or we quit because like something was bad, or we had bad managers and bad leaders and like no one to really make us feel empowered. So then we had to go out, and after years of like hurt and pain, we had to go out and create our own Disney World, or at least think that we're creating our own Disney World. At least in my mind, that's what I wanted to create, because I come from like, I'm full of love, right? And I think that comes from my Christian background, you know, of, you know, always like, you know, wanting to be closer to God. But then even the other people that aren't like that, they just need to survive. Like, and they just need a place to where like, you know, they can just go get a paycheck every week, support their families. And it's like, we don't have another choice. So we had to go out and start our own thing. So I'd say 75% of business owners probably start like that. And there's the other 25% that their parents were in business. They're in business. Like they understand like the math behind it and like that it's like a better future. I never understood that. I did it because I had to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's get back for just a minute. So you're in high school, you're getting done, you don't have a lot of pressure from anybody to really go to college, but it sounds kind of exciting. It's what your friends are doing.
Well, I could have been the first kid too, to like in my whole family. I was a family of like 14 grandkids. I was the oldest. I could have been the first one to like go and graduate.
Wow.
But you know, I failed on that.
Okay, tell me this. So I'm hearing from the relationship you had with your mom. Your mom wasn't putting a ton of pressure on you to do that. What about from your dad?
Yeah, no, so I had two dads. I had my real dad and my stepdad. My real dad was a solo entrepreneur. Didn't really talk much about like, you know, what business was like. He was it was basically just a job for him. I think the same thing probably with him. He probably couldn't figure out like, you know, a better path like at companies, you know, and he just started doing his own thing. And then my stepdad was a union steel worker. So it was like, you know, work, work, work. So all three of my parents, you know, hard workers, you know, get up early, you know, they just always were working. And they never really gave me any guidance on my future other than my mom was like, you got to have a job, got to have a paycheck, got to work 40 hours a week, you know, go clock in somewhere, go clock out, do your honest work, go home, do it again. And I was like, I got to do that for... what, 65? How? Like that's what? Terrible. The same thing over and over again every single day. Like I couldn't even stomach it. I was like, and I tried to please her so bad. And I remember when I got my first job in car sales with commission, she was like, "That's not a real job." So like, what? That's not a steady paycheck. You know, like that's not going to be the same paycheck every time. You know, it was commission only. They didn't even pay me about it. Like they didn't pay me until I sold something. And I was like, yeah, I know, Mom, but like, see this, I can make $100,000 a year. I can do this. And, but then I would get fired because of my, you know, ADHD symptoms. The same thing that would like happen in school. The manager would get like fed up with me because I'd ask too many questions. I would always have my own ideas. I would like try to, you know, do things a little different. And eventually I'd get fired. Almost every 6 months I would get fired from a job. From like 18 till 25 or 6.
Wow. Psychologically, emotionally, what is that? You know, feeling like you went through a lot of that as a child.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad because all the other, you know, cool kids at school graduated from college. You know, they did the 4 years on time, good grades, great job out of college. Like consistency, right? Everyone's consistent. I'm watching all these people that I thought I was looking up to, and I was like, yeah, look, I'm a failure. Like I'm not doing that. And look at my mom; she's still there with the same job, getting the same check, and she's like, yep, at least I still got a job. And I was like, and she was always doing it in a loving way, but like, it was like, because that's what she knew, that was her world, right? Yeah. Same thing with my stepdad. I mean, he's getting ready to retire, and he's been there his whole life doing the same thing every single day. And for me, I just had like, I don't know, I had all these ideas and these aspirations. I didn't know how to formulate them. I didn't know how, I had a vision, but I didn't know it was very, very foggy and muddy and dirty. And I couldn't figure out. I knew I wanted to be here, but I didn't know how to get there.
Yep, sure. And you go to community college. You said you lasted a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks probably. It was a social experiment for me. After the first 3 days, and I realized like they went over this thing called a syllabus, and I'm like, I can't even barely say syllabus. There's like way too many words in that thing. You're telling me I got to do all this stuff. Like, yeah.
You didn't really see the point. You didn't see the value, or you would have kept it up. Okay, so are you living at your mom's house at this time?
No, I actually moved in with my dad because I didn't like the rules at my mom's house.
Of course. All right.
Yeah, because so then I tried something different. Yeah, and then like that obviously was really upsetting to my mom. The day almost the day I turned 18, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm not following all these rules because there's a lot of rules, right? Got to be home at like 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. You got to have it. If you're not going to be in college, you either go to school or you got to get a job. And it was just like so many rules. And then when I was working, she'd make me save half my paycheck. And I was like, so the day I turned 18, I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, I'm going to go out and spend some of my money, right? Like, I'm going to go out and have some fun with my life. So I didn't like that structure. And looking back, the structure was probably the best thing for me because when I did it on my own, I rebelled like the opposite way, like completely to like just, and because I didn't have executive function, I didn't know how to actually operate. It led to a lot of pain and suffering for many, many years. I would say, I'd say the next 20 years of my life were very painful.
Wow. Okay.
Very painful.
All right, so you quit going to classes. You're living with your dad. Are you still working at this time at the grocery store?
Yeah, well, I work. So after I quit college, I was still kind of working at the grocery store like part time, and then I was like, hey, I need to be full time. And it was like $5. I was like getting $5 back then in 2000. It was like $5.15 an hour. I think I might have made $5.75 an hour. But hey, I had purpose there. They liked me. I was a boss.
Yeah.
So. I did that, but then I saw that ad for the car dealership, and I was like, "All right, I gotta go out and better myself. Like, I'm not going to just sit here and do the same thing over and over again." And then I went on the sales journey for the rest of my life until I became like a CEO. That's just when it's really been the last 2 years that I really became a CEO. Okay.
So you leave the grocery store, which was some stability, you had some purpose, you were leading some people there, you found some, maybe some love and acceptance there. You start hopping from sales job to sales job, and that's obviously hard on you being consistently fired or having to move from thing to thing.
Because there at the car dealership, there was lots of cool guys that I looked up to, right? That were like, I thought they were probably really old, but now I look back, they were probably only in their 30s because I was like, I was 18. So, but they all had like the shirt and ties, the slick back hair. They would drink coffee, wear sunglasses. They had cell phones, which cell phones were like, I went out and bought a cell phone because I wanted to be like them. And, and they were really good at what they did, and they were making tons of money. I mean, these guys were making 10, 15, 20, 30 grand a month. And I was like, holy cow, like I want to be like them. But then there was the bad side of some of them. They'd go to the bar and they'd drink every night. They would like, they would not be the most kindest towards women. I would say I didn't learn all good women skills, from those guys. Some of them, not all of them. But, I would want to hang out with the ones that were kind of rebels, not like the good ones that were like, going home with, every day, because I was single and I was hanging out with the guys that could hang out, and I learned a lot of good habits. I learned a lot of good sales tactics, but I learned a lot of bad personal habits along the way.
Yep. Okay. Were you always driven by that money? Like that was really attractive to you always?
Yeah, at first. No, it's not been always, but it's definitely changed over the last 5 or 6 years. But when I first, because everyone around me always complained about not having enough money. But we also always wanted the nice things, right? I remember I would get a budget for close at the beginning of every school year, my mom would give me a budget and she'd say, hey, like, this is the amount of money. I think it was like $300 or $400. And I look back now and I'm like, well, I mean, that was probably not bad back in like the 90s.
Yeah, then.
And I got some, and I would get some, but I would go out and buy all the designer stuff, man, because I wanted to fit in with the cool rich kids at school, and I'd only ever get one pair of tennis shoes every year, and I'd always buy the Michael Jordans, and so that way I could feel like I'd fit in. So I was always like, enamored with things I couldn't have, and I wanted to figure out how to get those, and I always wanted to figure out how to beat like complaining about not having enough money. And so I chased money for a long time, money and like acceptance for a long time. And it wasn't until just the past couple of years that I realized I get a lot more joy after actually, I've always got joy out of giving, and I've always been very generous and very giving. One common trait with ADHD people, you'll find most of them are very generous because we just want to keep giving because we feel like the world's been beating us up. So we just want to give to other people to make, because it feels good. Right. And, it wasn't until I had like, probably 4 or 5 employees when I realized like, yeah, like once I'm stable, like once I have certainty, like once I have my house paid and my car paid and like, basic gas and food and stuff like that, like, yeah, I can go on vacation whenever I want. Like money's just a tool. Then I started realizing how to use it as a tool, which then now it's like, it's definitely got a different purpose for me.
Sure. Okay. Well, I want to, I think everybody who, maybe not everyone, but the majority of people with whom I've had this sort of discussion, who've had ADHD have had a period of time in their life, and many of them have overcome it, but many of them are, maybe still struggling with it or most recently overcome it. A period of time in their life where finally all of the words that people said time after time after time really got to them. They were struggling, figuring out what they were going to do with their life. They didn't have direction. Maybe they didn't have somebody constant in their life who was able to be that mentor, that helping, that support, that really strong driving force to bring them out of that. And so they went through a period of time where things were really dark, and they would lean on things like you're talking about that were, they thought maybe they were going to get something out of that really was destructive to their life. So can you tell us, I know you shared a little bit with me about a period of your life where you use substances or whatever to try to kind of maybe numb the things that you were going through. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like how did you end up there? And then how were you able to overcome that?
So I remember being at a party one time and I was drinking, and I'd never done any hard drugs before. This is like 26 years old, I think. I was late because I remember all the kids doing it like when I was in high school and like even through college parties. Like, and I was always afraid, right? I was always afraid because I grew up in a strong Baptist home. Like, drink. I would do some drinking, and I would like got past that, and I was like, okay, I can handle that. Somebody offered me cocaine one day. I went down a bad path with that, and not actually using it as much. But then I was figuring out that other people liked it and wanted it, so then I started selling it, and I started getting into that world. And then I moved to Pittsburgh, and then because of I was good all the way up. I was working for my uncle for 5 years, didn't really do anything bad, But then I started my own business, and things got really hard because I couldn't handle all the things that were coming at me. And I reverted back to drinking and then doing drugs, and got to a point to where I actually overdosed on, I guess I was sold some fake pills and got some fentanyl. And it was really, it was a wake up call. It was a big wake up call. Nobody knew that I was using. Nobody at my company did. My family didn't even know. And obviously they knew, like my family knew when I, ended up going to the hospital. So I realized that there was something inside of me that was wrong, that was broken, and I needed to figure out how to fix it. But I knew deep down inside my heart, I'm a good person. Why is this happening to me? Why? And then I also thought, why does God keep letting me live through all this stuff? I said, so then I had to figure out a purpose, right? And it was through training and education and meeting people in the roofing industry that I really started to see all right, well, there's systems, there's processes. And once I started learning systems and processes, which I always hated because I didn't want to actually have to do all those rules and stuff like that. But it empowered me to be able to help train people. It helped me create, more vision and clarity for my company. It then made me become more on fire for what we were doing. And instead of just, serving customers and making sure that I could support my family, it became like, all right, cool. How can I empower my employees? How can I develop leaders, managers that I know are going to take care of my customers, you know, at the end of the day? And like, it's how are we going to keep building on that? And it was through systems and processes, which is kind of ironic. And when I read the book, you know, the EOS books, Rocket Fuel and Traction, I was like, wow, it's like, I can do this. Like, I can do this. And it's like been like the biggest super hack ever, because I feel like, you know, a combination of my own self journey of like, you know, doing lots of therapy. I do therapy twice a week. I do couples therapy and I do my own therapy. And then I also have, I have a business coach. And then I also have, what else do I do? I went to some events, like I went to a Tony Robbins event, right? And I started studying, like, what do all these successful people do? Like, they're just like me, but there's the system that they have, right? You know, these guys meditate in the morning, you know, they work out, you know, I'm still working on the working out part. That's like the last thing I got to conquer, I feel like, but, they do all these things, right? And then they let other people do what they're good at, right? Because with ADHD, I want to make sure before we end this podcast that everyone knows we talked about a lot of the bad stuff, right? The kind of like some of the, you know, the things that, you know, the uncontrollable, you know, fidgeting, and like there's lots of financial problems. We didn't get into that. I don't pay bills on time. Like I went bankrupt when I was like 22 years old because like, you know, I just like had money issues because it was like either all or nothing. And I don't sleep very well. I have difficulty maintaining relationships. Sometimes I forget to eat. Sometimes then after I forget to eat, then I'll go overeat. Like, and I'll just be like, because I'm trying to use that eating to like cure like, it's almost like being addicted to drugs and alcohol, right? So like I gained like all this weight back in my 20s. I went from like 175 pounds out of high school to getting over 300 pounds. And I was as high as 375 pounds. Back in like 2015, 16. So like that's some of the bad stuff, right? Chronic unemployment. Like it was bad, but the good stuff, the stuff that I actually started to identify with and label myself with is some of the things that you probably heard come out a little bit. But it's like problem solving. Like I'm really, really good at being able to solve complex problems that other people just like can look at for days. And I can just like come in and be like, well, let's just do this. Before people would like, you know, look at me, you know, my parents would look at me like, hey kid, what do you know? Because again, they're saying, you know, they're looking at the age, right? And they're looking at the body of work and, you know, no one's really believing me. But now I'm a really good problem solver. I'm really creative. I have an imagination that runs wild, right? I have a lot of compassion for people because I feel like, you know, the world's beat me up. So like, I feel I truly empathize with other humans. Everyone's sense of humor comes from, I feel like, some type of a dark place inside their inside their brain, inside their heart. You know, like Robin Williams committed suicide. You'll see a lot of people, like successful people, commit suicide that are funny people, like Chris Farley. Like, I mean, you look at these people and like they're so funny. Well, when they're so funny, to me now that I understand that, man, they're probably coming from just as dark of a place as they are funny. And and sometimes, you know, you need to be aware of that when you're talking to other people and be on the lookout. I can persevere. Like I've like overcome so many different things in my life because I just keep on going, like the Energizer Bunny that just doesn't stop. So to me, I look at that as a good thing, right? I have a really good memory of things that like happened to me in like the past. Sometimes I lose focus like on my micro memory. So like Elizabeth, if you tell me like I need to go fill out a document and like it needs to be done on Tuesday, you may think I forgot. I probably just didn't want to do it because I didn't find it interesting enough, you know? So I do have a good memory. You know, some people will be like, oh, you forgot that you told me that. But I'm like, no, man, like I remember. Multitasking can be a blessing and a curse. I can definitely handle different projects, you know, and kind of run them. Now, am I going to be detailed? No, but I can handle, you know, the balance between being a CEO. I can balance, you know, handling, helping coaching contractors, you know, with contractor dynamics. I can help, you know, maintain my family, right? Because I've gotten used to now like having systems, and I can kind of bounce. I actually get joy out of bouncing back and forth. It actually like keeps me interested and keeps me going. Sometimes when I'm super passionate about something, like my focus is like laser. It's like laser focused. Like I'm hyper focused when it's something like when there's a challenge or when there's something that they need to do, that you should always send me in, because for the first part of that project, I will get that ball rolling. My number one strength on Strength Finders is I'm an activator. And number two is I'm a woo, which means winning others over. So when you put those two together, it's a powerful combination for starting businesses and getting people aligned under a certain vision. So, and as you know, I have endless energy. You know, we do these 2-hour group calls at Contractor Dynamics, and I'm like just like going. And sometimes I do 2 of them in a day, right? And I never run out of like energy ever, like ever. It could be 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'll finally like pass out. I love life. I have a zeal for life. I feel like, you know, people with ADHD, we're always seeking acceptance. And because of that, we're always willing to go above and beyond. We're always willing to be generous. And I think that a lot of us, we know what's right and wrong. And we struggle with both. We struggle with everything that has polar opposites, right? Because it's like we know both sides. But sometimes we have a hard decision of like always, you know, when it comes to right and wrong, it's obviously doing the right thing. But like when it comes to a decision, as far as like a personnel decision at work, I have a really hard time making sometimes those decisions because like, all right, well, I feel for that person. Like I understand that they're not maybe the best person for this job, but like, well, what can we do with them? I don't want to just discard them, you know, like, you know, Willy Wonka where they like, you know, hit the button and they go into the, you know, the river or whatever that, you know, whatever happened with that chick. You know, because like I don't want, because I got discarded. How many times I got discarded?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of superpowers that come with it. There's a lot of obstacles. I think once we know how to navigate those obstacles, the people that have the superpowers with ADHD can be unleashed for really great things. Yeah. And the other people, you know, for instance, like I always, you know, for you and Joe to have to deal with me sometimes, I'm like, man, you guys are very, very kind and gracious, and you guys allow me to use my superpowers. I let you guys use your superpowers. And when that happens, man, there's nothing better. But when it doesn't happen, there's nothing worse.
Yeah, agreed. So let me pause there for a minute because this is kind of the point where I'd like for anyone listening to this to have some takeaways here. So let's talk about this. You reached a point where you discovered that there were some processes and systems that would really help you thrive. Okay. So first, can you tell us, how did you come to that point? Because there are people out there right now who are still trying to figure out how to do that, and they don't know where or even understand that there are processes out there for them. So how did you figure that out?
So for me, the first thing that I did was I developed, like, you know, I had a consultant come in one time and said, I need help with my business. This is like after my overdose. I'm like, hey man, like I need to figure out how to do this again so I'm not in pain, so I don't ever go back to that world. Mm-hmm. Right? Because when I'm in pain, I could do bad things. Mm-hmm. So they told me like, hey, you need to have a repeatable, you know, operations process of how you're going to deliver your customer experience to your job, to your homeowners, and write it down on paper. And I was like, all right, cool. But, all right, well, then that wasn't enough. So we're delivering good service, but now we're not selling enough. How do I train salespeople, right? So then I had a sales process. Then I had sales and operations kind of figured out a little bit. And I was like, all right, well, there's all these other problems, man. Like, how do I manage all these other parts of my business? How do I develop leaders? I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, why do I have there's a bunch of people like me on my team that are really good doers, and we all have a heart of gold, but like, sometimes the communication and like the team unity just sometimes was clunky. And I read this book, Rocket Fuel, and I read the difference between a visionary and an integrator. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's people out there like that can then help me. And like, we can like just use our superpowers. And I just been on like I was like, cool, that's what I need. I need more integrators around me. I said, Ben Fisher, there's enough Ben Fisher, like one Ben Fisher is enough to go around for everyone. Ben Fisher needs like 10 integrators to keep all that energy, to like harness that energy, right? And to be able to take that creativity and all those awesome ideas and then, you know, streamline it down to where, you know, we can get other people to execute on those that are going to like their job. The people like my stepdad who wants to go into the mill every day and do the same thing over and over again and do really good at his work. He's really proud of what he does, and he's one of the best people in his industry. But like, he doesn't want to have to create like, you know, the business opportunities. He doesn't want to have to like, you know, he just wants to go and do that and come home and don't even think about work. You know, where me, I can't stop thinking about work. Like, I love it. Like, I love thinking about different ways to like solve problems and develop people and different solutions for customers. And it's good because we all need each other, right? Like, I suck at accounting. Like, I tried to do accounting because like I thought I had to, like, because my mom always told me, man, you need to balance your checkbook. She would like write everything down in her checkbook and debits and credits. And I'm like, I ain't got time for that. It's probably why I had no money ever. because I would just go out and spend it.
Probably why that bankruptcy thing ended up happening.
Yeah, that was
so the two things that I'm hearing you say is, number one, you reached for outside help. You realized you were hitting a wall over and over and over again, so you asked for outside help to come in to help you put some processes in place. You read an awesome book that helped you understand yourself a little bit more and what you needed around you in order to help you thrive, right? Okay. And so then you went out and found those people. All right. So let's talk to the people who haven't figured that out yet. If they're in this, most of the people listening to this may be in the roofing industry or the contracting industry. Okay. So where would you suggest they go? Like what books, what people, who can they reach out to try to get some systems in place or to get some outside help to have some more direction and how to thrive in their businesses?
It really depends. I mean, I know this sounds so cliche, but it really depends on, first of all, what kind of person they are and what their strengths are, and then what they're really good at in their business and what they're really bad at. So I needed help with the things that I was like getting bad at, right? And so like I would strongly recommend like starting there first, like high priority type items that are just like hitting you in the face. Like if you could just make that pain go away, like solve it, right? And for me, like,
to help that.
Yeah, you got to do that. And then you just keep chipping away and you just keep getting to a place where you're just living in your like dream world. And, and I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to that dream world as I just I'm like almost addicted. Here, this is the good addiction. I'm addicted to the process of like keep surrounding myself with people who are complimentary to me and that can do the things that I know that we could be a great team with. And it's really all about understanding people. And so I use a lot of assessments, so I contacted a DISC certified trainer, and I have an awesome one. Her name's Ann Papenchak. She's out of Pittsburgh. She does consulting work, and she really helped help me understand who I was as a human, right? Before even I read the book Rocket Fuel. So when I read that and I started to feel really proud of myself and feel really good. And when you feel really good, then you can lead with confidence and you can lead with a little bit more like, because before I was always conflicted. I always had imposter syndrome. I always never knew what I was doing. That's why a lot of times I would go drink and do drugs because I was just tired of the back and forth in my brain of I know I'm onto something good, but man, I feel like I'm failing. That's constant in an entrepreneur, and especially when we're ADHD. Yeah. Without anybody to help support you. So when they can tell you what you're strong at and what you're good at, and you can change those labels in your brain from, all the negative connotations to all the good stuff, you can really start to kind of empower yourself, which then will help you empower other people. And it'll get actually people excited to come and work for you, because until you do that, I don't care. If you're a miserable person, and because you can't figure out systems or processes, you're not going to be able to attract your ideal integrator or your ideal executive assistant or your ideal accounting person or your ideal operations manager if you're not feeling good yourself. You got to feel good, man. You got to get to a place like that. I definitely recommend Tony Robbins. Anything that man says, I've never heard him say anything that I disagreed with yet so far. And that he's probably the only guru, motivational person, I disagree with Gary Vee a lot. I disagree with a lot of these Grant Cardone. I used to listen to all the time. I don't even listen to him anymore. There's some stuff that's good, but most of it's bad. Tony Robbins though, man, I tell you what, that guy, he's on to something.
Okay. So understanding yourself a little bit more, asking for some outside help, getting some professionals in their different fields to help you kind of understand next steps, identifying the places where you're hitting the wall, surrounding yourself with people who thrive in those specific areas, and then being on that side of things. I would say I am probably polar opposite. I can sit for a very long time. I can listen for a very long time. I can organize things, whatever. I'm very opposite, okay, of how you are. And I am in relationship often in many different ways with people who are a lot more like you. And I see so many incredible strengths. The energy and the ideas, to me, is something that I am envious of. And I agree with you that I find often that people with ADHD tend to be some of the most empathetic and often intuitive people. And here's what I ran into a lot before I understood people with ADHD more. I ran into this a lot. I didn't understand why you couldn't just work harder to be quiet, or work harder to sit still, or work harder and just finish the project, or work harder and stick with one thing and not be so inconsistent. I didn't understand that. I couldn't process through that. So there are a lot of people who haven't done the work to try to understand. Mm-hmm. So if you are talking to the people who are having trouble, like having community with you or understanding, what's the one thing that you would have them understand? Like, what's the one thing that you would want to communicate that you wish they understood in order to have like more productive community with people who are very opposite of you?
I would say, first of all, it's hard to have that discussion with somebody that you're close to, because they can't see it. So you got to find a third party, whether that's a therapist, a relationship coach, somebody that can help both people kind of mediate that conversation. But the biggest thing is education. Like, I mentioned that book, ADHD and Us. I feel like that's a great place to start. If you really love somebody that has ADHD and you really want to help understand them better, I mean, it's a great book. You'll probably end up crying after you read it because, realize that, like, it's just like, wow, we've been going about this wrong the whole time. But then it's also important for us people with ADHD to really understand, like, the challenges that, that you may have, and whatever those are, and, like, try to be empathetic to that, because a lot of times people with ADHD, we have a one-track brain. And it's like, and if it doesn't align with like where I'm going, like, it's like, oh, sorry. And it's not on purpose. It really isn't. So you have to slow down and be super empathetic. And I think it all starts with understanding yourself first, getting help there, and then figuring out how to communicate that with others and have these kind of conversations that like me and you are having today. Like, I have these conversations with the people closest to me at work and at home, trying to like help them understand me, so then that way I can operate freely in the society, in this world, and not feel bad.
Yeah. Okay. Last big question for me. Okay. So right now, you're talking to a young guy or girl who understands that they have ADHD. They're feeling low. They're hitting a lot of walls. They don't understand, why maybe they're so different from other people. They're in that kind of dark period of time. If you could really get through to someone in that period of time where they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life, where they're not always going to feel so frustrated and beat up, what would you tell them? What do you want that person to know?
That first of all, you're loved. Second of all, that you're enough. And, that there's other people, like millions of people that feel the same way, but there's also millions of people that have figured out how to thrive with ADHD, and it is definitely possible, but you definitely have to create your own environment to be successful in, and I think it starts with understanding yourself, so I strongly recommend finding a therapist or a relationship coach, and even just talking about that part of it. Don't necessarily have to talk about anything else, just talk about that part to get that foundation. I found that Strength Finders, it's a little assessment that you can take. It's really cool for that, and there's people certified in that, and that can make you feel really good because it'll show you your top 5 strengths. It'll show you all 34, and I'll put them in order. But like, I'm sure mine and yours are completely different. And when you read your top 5, you're like, yeah, that's me. And when I read mine, I'm like, yeah, that's me. And then we feel good, so we can start from a place of like feeling good about it. And then you just keep working, and it's constant work. You got to stay consistent with it because it's not going away. My ADHD, I was born with it. It's never just going to go away. There's no cure because it's the way my brain is. But there are systems and environments that you can put yourself into where you can thrive.
That's awesome. That's a good message. I think there are a lot of people out there who have not had anybody really look them in the eye and say that to them. And so I know there are people that are really feeling lost in that. So I hope that anybody listening can really hear that and take that to heart and take those steps forward. I know that you're a resource for people who are looking around for that kind of thing, but those are great book recommendations and then action steps for being able to find purpose and overcome the challenges there for sure.
This has been fun. I know you got to go. I really want to thank you for kind of like, flipping the switch and asking me the questions. That's the first time we ever did this. We're like, over 50 episodes in. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
I would love to have you back on sometime and actually interview like I do, like a regular guest. So like I can dig deep on you and learn a little bit more about you. But I appreciate everyone listening. If you guys got any value out of this episode, please like, comment, subscribe. If you guys like this topic, we can definitely go deeper. I was planning on having some my therapist on, some of my relationship coaches, and some of the assessment people on, because I do feel like it's helpful. The reason that we call this podcast the Big Fish Cares podcast is because I do care so much about trying to help other people find their true purpose. Because once you do, life is so much better. It is so exciting. So thanks for being here, and we'll be back next Friday with another episode of the Big Fish Cares podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Big Fish Cares podcast.